So many of you know that I grew up Unitarian Universalist. Let me turn this off so you're not hearing me through two mics. There we go. Many of you know that I grew up Unitarian Universalist and that I had the unusual experience of a Unitarian Universalist of spending 6 years nonetheless attending Catholic school. My Catholic school experience was certainly different than some people's because I actually chose it, but the result was similar, as you might imagine. And from age 12 to age 18, I was steeped in Catholicism. In some ways, that has shaped my faith almost as much as my Unitarian Universalist upbringing. It also very conveniently gave me something to rebel against as a teenager, without conflicting too much with my deep desire to follow the rules. I had to go to Mass regularly and take Catholic theology classes, and let me tell you, I was decidedly not Catholic. So I got to fall right into the really fun role of Catholic school atheist. I wrote snarky answers about God and my lack of belief in theology assignments, stayed stubbornly silent during shared moments of prayer, and found a whole crew of non-Catholic friends to sit together in Mass so that we could fill a whole row that conspicuously stayed seated during communion. I know, my wild side, right? I was committed to being not Catholic even more than I was committed to being a Unitarian Universalist at that point. I would tolerate it, Catholicism that is, but I certainly wasn't going to find any good in it. I was all in on the teenager certainty that I was right, and that I knew exactly where things stood with this whole religion and God business. Now, looking back at it from this mature vantage point, I cringe a little bit, but I also understand it. I was surrounded by folks who were so certain in their faith, who thought that they had the truth. And so I felt that I needed to declare my different truth with just as much certainty. Perhaps I thought my faith wasn't sturdy enough unless it was based in that same kind of certainty that others had. Now, 20 plus years later, it turns out my beliefs have evolved. Imagine that. Now, while I still wouldn't say I believe in God, I no longer identify as an atheist in the way I did in high school. I believe a whole lot of things about this universe, but perhaps chief among them is that I know that I don't know everything. I know that there is mystery and wonder that is beyond my comprehension. I know that I've experienced a sense of love that holds me, that is bigger than any single person, and certainly a lot bigger than me. And I'm much more interested in leaning into the mystery and wonder than I am in declaring with any certainty what may or may not exist in the universe. And what I love about Unitarian Universalism is that it has held me through all of this. Now, on the surface, my personal faith journey may look a tad boring, right? After all, have I actually journeyed anywhere? At 2 years old, I was dedicated in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And here I am, 35 years later, standing in front of another Unitarian Universalist congregation. A very different one than I grew up in, but what kind of journey is it if you end up in the same place you began? And yet, within this Unitarian Universalist faith journey, I have traveled all over, seeking truth, seeking purpose, seeking community. And I am not the same person I was at 2 years old or at 16 years old. I know that for sure. I have heard others express their appreciation of the space that Unitarian Universalism has given them to grow and change in their beliefs about the world. I think this is one of the great gifts of our tradition. It offers us a space to be seekers, eternal seekers. We come, after all, from this long line of seekers. A love of seeking is more deeply a part of UU DNA than any sense of certainty. Theological evolution is ingrained in the story of Unitarian Universalism. One of my favorite examples of this is Francis David. Francis David was a 16th century preacher in Transylvania. He studied theology in a time of great upheaval during the Reformation. It was a time when regular old people were just beginning to be able to read the Bible for themselves and to come to their own conclusions about what it had to say. Francis David began life as a Catholic and in fact was ordained as a Catholic priest. But he didn't stop there. He read the Bible and read it again and read it again, and he kept coming to new conclusions about the truth and about what it all meant for his theology. As I said, he was a Catholic priest first, but his study of Scripture soon led him to convert to Lutheranism. And in fact, he became the Lutheran Bishop of Transylvania. Even after becoming bishop, when, you're supposed to be certain, right? When you're a bishop? But even after becoming bishop, David continued to wrestle with his faith and converted again to Calvinism. Now, he must have been a really good leader because it did not take long before he was the Calvinist Bishop of Transylvania. And eventually he became the court preacher with the ear of King John Sigismund. His study continued in this role, and he began to doubt the idea of God as a Trinity. He couldn't find anything that was clear about this in the Bible, especially when it came to the nature of the Holy Spirit. And thus, Francis David became a Unitarian. This anti-Trinitarian sentiment was deeply heretical in all of those other traditions he had tried on. But he got there anyway. And guess what? He became the Unitarian Bishop of Transylvania. But what I love most about Francis David's story is that he didn't just become a Unitarian and then decide that everyone else should be a Unitarian too. Instead, he was the preacher who influenced one of the first declarations of religious freedom, the Edict of Torda. The Edict of Torda declared that in Transylvania, Catholics, Lutherans, Calvinists, and Unitarians could all coexist. This was a big deal in Reformation Europe. Elsewhere in the continent, whoever was in power in any given area got to decide which of the varieties of Christian everyone else in that region had to be. And there were many bloody battles and heresy trials because of the differences in doctrine. The Edict of Torda offered a different way, declaring, quote, "Ministers should everywhere preach and proclaim the gospel according to their understanding of it. And if their community is willing to accept this, good. If not, however, no one should be compelled by force if their spirit is not at peace. No one is permitted to threaten imprisonment or banish anyone because of their teaching, because faith is a gift from God." And I have to believe that the reason this edict came about is because Francis David had done so much reading and changing his mind and evolving in his theology that he understood that there was more than one way to interpret these words in the Bible. And he knew that he wasn't done, right? That he may yet continue on this journey of theological evolution. He wanted to make space for others to evolve and grow and change and learn and seek throughout their lives, just as he had. It was so different from what Christianity had looked like for the previous 1,500 years. A steady doctrine, the authority coming all from the priests, the swift retribution if you strayed from that particular theological path. And it is also where the roots of modern-day Unitarian Universalism are so clear. This encouragement to evolve and grow in your beliefs over time, the openness to the existence of multiple truths, the acceptance of diversity within our midst. Like us modern Unitarian Universalists, Francis David was a seeker, living into a life of curiosity and wonder. When I introduce Unitarian Universalism, you may have noticed that I often describe us as being a community of seekers. Not a community of finders, though I do believe we find plenty on our journeys. But answers are not really our specialty as Unitarian Universalists, nor is that certainty that I tried to espouse as a teenager. Instead, we often find ourselves more in the realm of doubt and questioning. Cherish your doubts, Robert Weston tells us. Doubt is the key to the door of knowledge. It is the servant of discovery. A belief which may not be questioned binds us in error, for there is incompleteness and imperfection in every belief. And so, we question everything. Sometimes Unitarian Universalists are criticized for this, or said to be wishy-washy. There's this sense that our constant questioning, our lifelong seeking, means that we don't have enough substance of our own, or that there is nothing that binds us together. Religion is, after all, meant to make sense of the world, to give us answers, to create order out of the chaos of this existence. There are times that certainty would be easier, right? And it is easy for us to desire certainty, because certainty often appears better than seeking and questioning, and definitely better than doubting. Now, in seminary, I had to take 2 semesters of what was called systematic theology. We went through all the categories of beliefs systematically, right? God, humanity, salvation, Christology, eschatology, ecclesiology, all of it. We did it all. And at the end of each unit, we were assigned a paper in which we had to first summarize the various viewpoints we had read, and then describe how our tradition compared with those various opinions. Now, as a Unitarian Universalist, I was already at a disadvantage because the whole thing was being taught from a Christian perspective. And I found I was sometimes envied my classmates from the various Protestant traditions who had these definitive texts upon which to base the second half of those papers. It wasn't that there was nothing for me to draw from, rather there were so many sources, so many directions I could go, that it was sometimes overwhelming. It all would have been easier if we UUs were a little more interested in theological certainty. Easier, yes. And yet, I know that I learned so much about what I believe and what I think lies at the core of Unitarian Universalism because I had to actually work at those papers. I had to put my gut feelings into conversation with theologians from across the ages and figure out for myself what made sense. The journey left me with many more questions, but also more deeply grounded in UU theology than I had ever thought possible. And the most important truth of this story is that I didn't get there on my own. It was only because there was this solid community of UUs in that class together that I could really move forward on my journey. Together, we were able to sort through the many ideas and challenge each other to go deeper. As you might expect, we didn't all come to exactly the same conclusions, but we held each other accountable to our shared values, reminding each other of the love that was even then at the center of our faith. This is the key, I think, to what makes this mishmash of doubters and questioners, yes, I'm talking about you, into a religion. We are not just seekers, right? We are a community of seekers. Those who have chosen to travel together on this journey. We need that community to keep us accountable in our seeking, to root us as we ask those big questions. And of course, to remind us that whatever certainty we have in this moment may yet change. It is in community that we make sense of the world, find meaning in this journey of life. If we are to be eternal seekers, never resting too deeply in the certainty of any moment, we're going to need some companions in that seeking. We cherish our doubts, yes, but we cherish even more those who doubt alongside us. In this faith, we may not find easy answers to any of life's questions. But I know that we will find meaning on this journey, and we will always find friends to share the road, wherever it might take us next. May it be so.